I used to love field trips. They were the only break in my monotone high school. Those rare days where the walls of the classroom didn't close in, where the lighting wasn't flickering fluorescent bulbs, and where the teachers were just chaperones, not interrogators. But this one rewired my brain. It was the spring of 9th grade, and our biology teacher, Mr. Halpern, pitched something different. He was always trying to be the cool teacher, the kind who didn't assign textbooks, who showed nature documentaries and paused them every 5 minutes to talk about climate collapse like it was an action movie. Immersion, he said, pacing the front of the class like a TED talker. That's how you learn ecosystems, not from diagrams, from experience. He set up a weekend camping trip to Hollow Creek Preserve. It was a state-protected wilderness area about 3 hours north of our town. Pine forests, winding trails, creeks, rock bluffs, the whole works. 2 nights, 22 students, 3 adults, Mr. Halpern plus 2 parent chaperones, Mr. Dalton, a quiet ex-Marine, and Miss Marquez, a PTA mom with hiking boots and laminated first aid guides. None of us were worried. Most of us were excited. We were freshman kids. How could a trip like that go wrong? We arrived around 10:30 a.m. on Friday. A ranger gave a brief talk at the station about fire safety, local wildlife, and staying on marked trails. Mr. Halpern had plotted out a basic 2-mile hike into our camp zone, then a loop trail we'd take later that afternoon. Blue trail, he said. Clear markers, easy terrain, and can't miss it. But about an hour into that loop hike, after we'd set up camp, and our brief trail lunch, we'd seen our second stake sunning itself on a rock. We came to an unexpected fork. The path split in 2, one wide and clearly traveled, the other narrow and overgrown. There was a wooden post, but the sign was missing, just an empty bracket where a marker once was. Mr. Halpern looked at his paper map, frowned, and said something I'll never forget. Looks like this was cut off from the old fire maps, but it probably loops around. Nobody questioned it. I mean, why would we? The path narrowed fast. We crossed the dry steam bed, scrambled over down logs. The air changed. It got stiller, quieter, like the deeper parts of the forest swallowed sound. By the time someone asked when we looped back, we'd already gone hours too far. Mr. Halpern hesitated, then admitted, I think we took a wrong turn, but we're not far, let's turn around. Except, when we turned back, nothing looked familiar. The junction was gone. Somehow, we missed it or it never existed the way we remembered. Phones had no service. Compass apps glitched or pointed the same direction. We camped that night in a dry clearing, cold and jittery. Some of the boys tried to act tough, but even they got quiet when the howls started around midnight. Coyote, probably. But the way they circled, how close they felt. Food was running low. No one had planned for more than one night of hiking. We had some trail mix, energy bars, a few apples. One girl, Jocelyn, had packed marshmallows. That became breakfast, divided among 20. People stopped joking. That morning, a kid named Devin collapsed. Heat stroke or maybe dehydration. Mr. Dalton took control, told us to ration water. We started trying to filter creek water with shirts despite Mr. Halpern's warnings. Someone found iodine tablets in Mr. Marquez's pack. They tasted like pool water and didn't work fast enough. That afternoon, we found an old structure, a collapsed hunting shack with rusted tools and a rotting cot. It was our only shelter, and that night it rained. That was the day the group splintered. Some kids wanted to stay, build signal fires, conserve energy. Others, including Mr. Halpern, insisted we had to keep moving, to find higher ground and scout. Mr. Dalton tried to compromise. Groups of 4, one stays here, one scouts. They flipped a coin. I ended up in the scouting group with Carla, Brian, and Mr. Halpern. We climbed a ridge and saw nothing but trees, no roads, no structures, no trails. That night when we returned, Lily was gone. They said she'd gone to pee and never came back. We searched the woods, screaming her name, until it got too dark to see. I still remember hearing Carla whisper, maybe she didn't want to come back. That morning, Brian said he heard something in the woods. A man's voice kept saying, this way, over and over, like a recording. We all thought he was dehydrated and delirious, until I heard it too. A soft raspy call from the trees, Always ahead, never behind. This way. Mr. Halpern followed it. We walked into the trees before any of us could stop him. Never said goodbye. Just vanished between the pines. No one spoke. We were out of food. Water was boiled rain or muddy runoff. We found a torn jacket on a branch, Marine's. She'd been quiet the whole trip, walking in the back. She disappeared sometime the night before. I remember Miss Marquez just sitting there, hands in her lap, whispering prayers under her breath. Brian tried to build a flare out of his vape in a battery. It sparked with nothing more. Someone joked about cannibalism and no one laughed. Until Carla snapped. Started screaming at a tree, thought it was her mom. Said she saw headlights through the branches. We held her down until she stopped struggling. And then we saw it. Smoke. A long gray column rising above the trees. Brian had managed to light a fire using a busted camera lens. And then that night, we heard a helicopter. We screamed, waved shirts, fired off a flare from someone's emergency kit. The chopper circled, then vanished, and we almost broke. A search party arrived at dawn. Dogs, radios, EMTs. Turns out we'd crossed 3 ridges out of the preserve into unmanaged forest land. No trails, no maps, no GPS coverage. 3 people never came back. Mr. Halpern, Lily, and Marine. They called it a disorientation event, the kind that happens when people panic and keep moving, losing their sense of direction. But those of us who were there, we remember the voice. This way. I don't go near forests anymore. I don't sleep with my window open if there are trees outside. And sometimes when I'm alone, I still hear it, soft and scratchy, just below the wind. This way. I've told myself 1,000 times not to think about what happened at Briar Falls. I've buried it under college exams, bar noise, work emails, everything. But sometimes I still hear it, the creak of an old house, in the static of a bad phone connection, in the silence. We were just 5 dumb high school juniors on a field trip that should have been forgettable, and maybe it would have been if we just stayed at camp like we were supposed to. But we thought we were clever, curious, brave, and because of that, these are the things we've seen, that I can't explain. And I'm not sure anyone would believe even if I could. It started on the second night of our weekend trip to Briar Falls Reserve. Our environmental science teacher, Miss Tilden, organized it as an immersive experience, where we'd all catalog plants, track steam temperatures, and pretend we cared more about wetlands than phone service. Our group, me, Evan, Josh, Danny, and Ty, was tight. We'd grown up together, survived middle school, awkward puberty, and that weird summer where everyone tried to skateboard and broke something. We were inseparable, the kind of friends who joked about horror movies while secretly checking closets before bed. It was just past 6 p.m. The sun was starting to dip, and camp was winding down. Miss Tilden had given us the okay to explore, just a little beyond the marked trails, as long as we were back before dark. So of course, we didn't listen. Evan was the ringleader. He was always tall, lanky, and permanently smirking. He led us past the trails into denser bush, calling it uncharted territory, like we were explorers. The trees grew tighter. The air felt heavier. Still, we pushed on. We weren't worried. Why would we be? That's when we found the cabin. It sat like it had been dropped there by accident, leaning slightly, half choked by vines, its wooden siding weathered to the color of ash. One broken window stared out at us like a lazy eye. No tire tracks, no lights, no sound. We circled it cautiously, laughing at ourselves to keep our nerves down. The door was closed but not locked. Ty nudged it open with his boot, and it creaked like something out of a cliché horror movie. We half expected bats to fly out. Inside it was cold, not air-conditioned cold, wrong cold, like the temperature dropped 10 degrees as soon as you stepped in. The furniture was sparse and old, a wobbly table, lamp, dusty wooden stove. On the wall, yellowed newspaper clippings were tacked in uneven rows. We couldn't make out the text, most were too faded. Josh called it the murder shack, and we laughed too hard at that. But I remember very clearly that we stopped laughing the moment Ty opened the small pantry and found fresh food. Not new, not grocery store new, but Not abandoned either. Canned beans, a sealed loaf of bread, a half-used jar of peanut butter. We exchanged glasses. Suddenly, the place wasn't empty, just unattended. That was our first warning. We ignored it. Evan found a trap door under a rug. He pried it open, revealing steep wooden steps vanishing into darkness. Basement, he said. Bet there's treasure. Danny stayed back. We should go. This isn't part of the park. But Josh was already halfway down, phone flashlights slicing into the black. I followed with my heart hammering. The basement wasn't big. Dirt floor, stone walls, a small cot in the corner, shelf filled with books, all of them blank, not a single word inside, dozens of them. Then Evan found the Polaroids. They were in a small metal tin stacked neatly. The top one showed the back of someone's head, curly hair standing near trees. The second showed a tent. The third was of our group, walking on the trail earlier that day. We stared at each other in silence. Someone had taken our picture. That's when we heard the sound upstairs, a floorboard groaning, slowly, deliberately. We froze, then heard a voice, low, gravel, and thick. "Who's down there?" We bolted. Evan dropped the tin. The Polaroids spilled across the floor, and we didn't pick them up. We scrambled out to the trap door, pushed through the front door, and tore through the woods like hunted animals. Josh scraped his arm in a tree. Danny lost a shoe, but none of us looked back. By the time we saw the edge of camp, the sky was black. We didn't say a word to the teachers. What would we even say? We broke into someone's house? They'd never believe us. We weren't exactly following the rules. We sat by the fire that night, pretending to be normal, pretending we hadn't just done something stupid. Then we heard it again. A twig snap, near the edge of the woods. We looked, and there was nothing. But something was off. The trees felt too still. The silence too tight. Danny was the first to say it. I think he followed us. We didn't sleep. That morning, Miss Tilden discovered someone had slashed the tires on both teacher vehicles. Long, slow cuts, jagged and deep. She blamed vandals, probably local kids. She radioed the park office, but it would take hours for a ranger to hike in and help. We were stuck for the day. We sat close, real close. Nobody wanted to wander off. At one point, Ty whispered, "I don't think this guy lives in that cabin. I think he waits there, for people." That night, Danny started screaming in her tent. We ran to her. She said she woke up to breathing inside the tent. She turned on her flashlight and saw the fabric bulging slightly inward, like a hand was resting gently on the outside. We packed up the next morning, early. The ranger arrived, helped replace a tire, and we were out of there before noon. We never told them about the cabin. We never told anyone. A week later, Danny got an envelope in the mail. No return address, just a single Polaroid inside. It was a photo of her, sleeping in her tent. That's when we all stopped talking. We deleted group chats, stopped hanging out, drifted apart like leaves in a river. I don't camp anymore. I don't hike. I live in a high-rise downtown with no trees in sight. And I never open my blinds at night, ever. Because sometimes I think I see something across the street in the window of the building opposite mine. A shape, a pale face, watching and waiting. And when I turn away, just before sleep, I sometimes hear it in the floorboards. Who's down there? It's been almost 2 years since it happened. I still don't like going into malls. I take side exits. I keep my back to walls when I sit in public places. I scan faces, corners, shadows, everywhere. I've been through therapy. I've been told it wasn't my fault. But even now, sometimes I still wake up in a cold sweat, thinking about that man's face and how nobody believed us until it was too late. It started as something harmless. Our high school sociology class was doing a field study project on marketing and consumer behavior. Mr. Camden, our teacher, had arranged a trip to Springview Mall, a huge, sprawling shopping complex about an hour outside of town. I was in a group with 3 friends, Lacey, my best friend since middle school, Zoe, who was shy but very sharp, and Drew, the kind of guy who joked to hide how smart he was. We weren't troublemakers, just the kind of kids who paid attention, took notes, and rolled their eyes when Mr. Camden made bad puns. The trip started out fine. We were supposed to observe shopping behavior and take pictures of different store layouts for a presentation. Lacey and Zoe got into it. Drew and I, not so much. We wandered around, took a few pictures, stopped at a juice place, and figured we'd burn time until lunch. That's when things started to go wrong. We were sitting on a bench on the second level, near a big skylight overlooking the food court. We were laughing about something Drew said, something dumb about mannequins being silent influencers. Then Lacey leaned toward me and whispered, "Don't freak out, but I think that guy's watching us." I turned casually, and there he was, staring at us from across the mall. Tall, pale, early 30s maybe, dressed in black from head to toe, with his hood up. He wasn't browsing, he wasn't on his phone, he wasn't talking to anyone. He was just standing and staring right at us. At first, I told myself he might just be zoned out. People stare all the time, but when we moved, got up, walked to a clothing store, he moved too. Not fast and not too close. He just kept reappearing 3 stores behind, standing near racks, pretending to glance at windows, but always looking. "Okay," Drew muttered. "This is actually creepy." We decided to test it. We took a long loop down the escalator and around a perfume kiosk, through a store called Modern Attic, and then back up a different escalator. And he was still there, closer this time, maybe 40 feet behind. Zoe's hands were shaking. He's not just walking, he's tracking us. We ducked into a bath and body shop and crouched behind one of the tall shelving units. I peeked through a crack between bottles of hand lotion. He walked by the store, slowed down, then stopped, outside, just waiting. I don't think I'll ever forget how casual he looked, like he had all the time in the world, like he knew we'd come back out eventually. Zoe was panicking. "Let's go to security right now." When we checked the mall directory, I made our way to the nearest security station. But when we got there, the office was closed. A small sign taped to the window said, "Back in 15 minutes. Classic. We couldn't decide what to do. Wait and risk him catching up, keep moving, find Mr. Camden. That's when we saw the second man. Standing near a vending machine, different guy, shorter, bulkier, wearing a red baseball cap and cargo pants. He was facing the vending machine but not putting money in, not looking at anything. He was watching us through the reflection. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't just a creep. There were 2 of them, maybe more, and they were coordinated. "We're being stalked," Lacey said out loud, voice shaking. "Like hunted." We bolted. At that point, our panic completely took over. We ran, downstairs, through stores, into a service corridor with no signs, just gray walls and that awful buzzing fluorescent light. But someone had already been there. Scrawled in Sharpie on the wall was, "Don't let them corner you." We didn't stick around to read more. We eventually burst into the back of a store that led out to the main mall again. A woman working the register gave us a weird look as we raced past her, out into the open. Somehow we ended up on the first floor, opposite the food court. We could see it across the wide central hallway. People, bright lights, teachers, safety. And just before we made our move, Drew stopped dead. "They're trying to funnel us," he said. I looked around. 2 more men, not the same as before. One near the escalator, another by the juice stand, both watching, not moving, blocking exits. They were trying to trap us in the quiet part of the mall. Zoe grabbed my arm. "Bathroom," she hissed. We ducked into the woman's restroom behind a sunglass kiosk. It was quiet, one woman in there, washing her hands. We waited in a stall, huddled. That's when someone entered. Not the woman. Heavy boots, with slow steps. The door didn't open. Whoever it was had just walked in, stopped, and waited. We held our breath, and after maybe 30 seconds, which felt like an eternity, they turned and left. We waited another 10 minutes, then ran. We sprinted across the mall and into the food court, right into Mr. Camden. We were red-faced, sweating, borderline hysterical. He didn't know what to make of it. We told him everything. He listened, took notes, walked us back to security, where we once again explained everything. The security guard nodded slowly. "We'll take a look at the footage," he said. "Sometimes people just give off bad vibes. Doesn't mean anything happened." And that was it. No police report, no formal investigation, no names asked, nothing. We got back on the bus like nothing happened. Some kids were complaining about cold burgers. Others were playing music on their phones. But we sat in silence. That night, Drew called me. He got in a DM on Instagram from an account with no picture and a name like a serial number. The message just said, "Good instincts. You turned too soon." I got the same message the next day. So did Zoe, and so did Lacey. We didn't respond. We deleted our social media for months. We all started walking to school together, changed our routes, looked over our shoulders, and we never saw them again. But sometimes, I think about what would have happened if we hadn't looked up when we did, if we hadn't noticed that man staring, if we'd hesitated. Sometimes I dream about a cold, gray room with no windows, fluorescent lights, a door with no handle, and footsteps in the hallway. It's been over a year now, and I still hear her screaming. Not the scream when she fell, not the initial panic. I mean the one near the end, the one that sounded like her mind had already left her body, the one that came right before silence. That scream plays in my head when I try to fall asleep, when the house creaks, or when I find myself alone in quiet places. I don't go hiking anymore. I don't go near the woods, and I'll sure never walk across ground I don't trust, because now I know the earth can open up and swallow you whole, no warning, no logic, just gone. Now let me go back. It was a Thursday morning when we took the field trip to Black Hollow Preserve, an old stretch of forest land known for its limestone formations and cave networks. Our environmental science teacher, Mr. Dale, was the enthusiastic type. He wore hiking boots every day, even when it rained. He got special permission for us to do hands-on geological study off the normal paths. Real-world science, he called it. Our assignment was simple. Follow a map trail, observe ground composition, record the signs, take notes. We had one walkie-talkie to contact the main group or the ranger station if needed. The hike started fine. Birds, wind, sunlight filtering through dead leaves. Spring was just starting to win over winter. The air had that chilly bite, but the sun felt warm when it hit your face. We joked, took some photos of rock layers, climbed over a fallen log that smelled like wet rot. We made it to a shallow ridge where the trail faded a bit. The path was covered in last fall's leaves, damp and slippery. That's when Jordan decided to get off trail. He chased a squirrel, dumb move. He laughed about it, until we realized he'd led us a good 100 yards off our mapped area. We weren't totally lost, just misaligned. Trey suggested we cut through a ravine to reconnect with the marked loop. It looked fine on the map, just a shallow dip and rise. That ravine was our mistake. The ground there was soft, not mud, just fragile, like walking on a sponge stretched over hollow space. We didn't realize it at first. Casey was right in front of me. Brooke was behind her, and then it happened. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. There was no explosion of dust or a roar of falling earth. It was more like the sound of tearing cloth, followed by a wet thud. I turned and she was gone. No scream at first, just absence. We rushed back. Casey reached the edge first. I'll never forget the look on her face. When she looked down, her jaw slack, hands trembling. She just kept whispering, "No, no, 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 no." The hole was jagged, maybe 6 or 7 feet wide, almost perfectly round. The ground around it was cracked, like a shattered plate. Beneath it, darkness, deep. It smelled of wet earth and stone and something old. "Brooke!" I shouted. We all took turns yelling her name. Finally, a voice echoed up. "I'm down here, I can't move my leg." Relief hit us like a wave. Jordan almost cried. Alyssa dropped to her knees beside the edge. We tried everything. We shouted back and forth, asked if she could see anything, if anything was bleeding, if she could sit up. She kept saying the same thing. "It's cold, I can't see. It's really, really cold." Trey got out his multi-tool and started trying to knot together jackets to make a rope, but the hole was far deeper than we thought. We dropped a rock with Casey's keychain, flashlight attached, nothing. It disappeared after maybe 30 feet, swallowed by the dark. And then Brooke started saying weird things. At first it was, "Something's dripping." Then, "It's moving down here." Then in a whisper, "I don't think I'm alone." That was when the fear really hit me. I didn't want to believe it. Maybe she was concussed. Maybe her mind was spiraling. But she sounded too clear, too lucid. She kept saying, "It's watching me." We screamed back, begged her to tell us what she meant. She started sobbing. Then, "It touched my ankle." That's when Trey said, "We need to call the ranger station now." He grabbed the walkie-talkie. Static. We climbed the ridge behind us to try to find a signal. Finally, faint clarity. He got through to someone, gave our coordinates, explained what happened. Rescue will be there in 45 minutes, they said. We had to wait. That's when Brooke screamed again. This time it wasn't fear. It was true terror. Something primal. Something people only make when they feel death on their skin. She kept screaming for almost a minute. Then silence. We shouted, nothing. Then, soft sobbing. I can't move. It's right next to me. Casey dropped to her knees, sobbing. Alyssa backed away, hand over her mouth. Trey gripped his multi-tool like it was a weapon. Jordan looked like he was about to puke. I kept yelling, Brooke, stay with us. It's okay, help is coming. She said one more thing, barely, above a whisper. It's in the rock. It's coming out. Then we heard a sound, a wet, slithering shift, like stone dragging across stone. And then, nothing. We didn't hear her voice again. When rescue finally arrived, ropes, lights, helmet gear, they rappelled down in silence. It took over 30 minutes for them to get to the bottom. When they pulled her up, she was alive, but barely. Her leg was broken in 3 places. Her ribs were cracked. Her arms were scratched to heck. But that wasn't what scared us. It was her face. Her eyes were wide open, pupils blown out. She wasn't crying, wasn't screaming. She was gone, alive but not there. She didn't respond when they spoke to her, didn't flinch at the light, just kept whispering something over and over that we couldn't make out. She was in the hospital for weeks, never came back to school. We heard she was transferred to a facility in another state, closer to her family. All we knew was that she didn't talk anymore. Not to doctors, not to her parents, not even to herself. The last thing I ever heard about her was from Casey. She visited once, months later. Brooke was sitting in a chair, staring at the corner of the room. She said 2 words. It waits. Sometimes I think what would have happened if I had walked ahead of Casey, if it had been me who took that step, or worse, if the ground hadn't given away, if that thing, whatever was down there, hadn't needed the fall to reach us. I don't walk on dead leaves anymore, and I never trust the ground under my feet, because that thing Brooke saw, it's still down there, and it's patient. I never expected that field trip to change the way I see the world. I thought it'd be like every other school outing, a chance to escape the classroom for a day, maybe snap a few photos and hear some old stories about forgotten places. But the moment we stepped into that warehouse on Miller's Road, something shifted, something dark and ancient that I still can't explain. Mr. Hayes, our history teacher, had been taking up the trip for weeks. She was the type who found magic in dusty archives and crumbling buildings. History isn't just dates and names, she told us. It's the stories that lock inside the walls and floors. Today, you're going to feel that history. 7 of us from class made the trip. Me, Jake, Sarah, Tim, Lily, Marcus, and Ella. Jake, of course, was the firecracker, daring and impatient, the one who made everything feel like a challenge. Sarah kept to herself, writing quietly in a battered notebook. Tim brought his camera everywhere, eyes always searching for the perfect shot. Lily was nervous about everything, but fascinated. Marcus, over the skeptic, rolled his eyes at most of what Miss Hayes said. Ella, quiet and sweet, followed along with a gentle curiosity. The bus rumbled down crackled roads through neighborhoods where cities seemed to be slowly unraveling. The industrial district appeared like a ghost town. Giant warehouses lined up like forgotten skeletons. Windows darker shattered. Walls cracked and stained by years of neglect. We started on the main path, listening to the guide talk about the factories that had once powered the city's economy. The air smelled of rust and dust, sharp and stale. My attention kept drifting to the shadows, the places where sunlight didn't reach. Jake wasn't content to stay with the group. His eyes lit up when he spotted a smaller warehouse off the main path, half hidden behind tangled weeds and rusted machinery. The sliding metal door hung ajar, creaking in the wind. "Come on," he called. "This one looks way cooler." Sarah glanced at me, her eyes wide but curious. Despite the warning to stay with the group, we followed Jake toward the warehouse. As we got closer, the smell changed. heavier, sour, and metallic. It was like stepping into a vault where the air had been trapped for decades, stale and suffocating. Jake pushed the door open with a groan. Inside, the darkness was almost complete, broken by the weak beams from her flashlights. The door was littered with broken crates, shards of glass, and scrapes of twisted metal. The walls, peeling and stained, were scratched with strange symbols that didn't make sense, jagged lines that felt like warnings. We moved slowly, our footsteps echoing in the hollow space. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The dust hung thick in the air, swirling with every breath. Suddenly, a slow scraping sound cut through the silence, like metal dragging across concrete. It wasn't mechanical, it was deliberate, slow and steady. Jake scoffed. Old pipes or rats, probably. But my heart hammered so loud, I wasn't sure if they could hear it. The scraping stopped just as suddenly, replaced by a soft whisper, barely audible. Leave. I froze, every muscle tight. Sarah's voice trembled. Did you hear that? Before we could answer, a shadow flickered at the edge of the light, tall, hunched, moving in jerks that didn't look natural. I caught a glimpse of a pale, twisted face, gaunt with hollow eyes, before it vanished behind a stack of crates. Guys, we need to go, I whispered. Jake swallowed hard but nodded. He turned toward the door, but it slammed shut with a thunderous bang that shook the walls. The sudden darkness was suffocating. We shouted, banging on the heavy metal door, but it wouldn't move. Then the whispers returned, louder and overlapping, filling every corner of the warehouse. Leave, leave, leave! Our flashlights flickered and died, plunging us into complete blackness. I could feel cold breath on my neck, like someone standing inches behind me. The voice hissed again. You shouldn't be here! Panic surged through me. I slammed my fists against the door until they bled, until the door finally creaked open, and the harsh sunlight hit my face. We spilled out, gasping for air, hands trembling. Miss Hayes and the rest of the group rushed over, eyes wide with shock. The guide told us later, the warehouse had been sealed after a deadly fire in the late 70s. Workers trapped inside, their bodies never fully recovered. The place had a reputation. Whispered warnings from locals who said the spirits lingered, restless and angry. Back home that night, sleep was impossible. I lay awake hearing the scraping and the whispers inside my head. I checked every shadow in my room, every creak of the house, wondering if something had followed me back. The next day, I looked up the warehouse history. The fire had been terrible. Flames racing through wooden beams, workers calling out for help, voices lost in smoke. Official records said the building was condemned and sealed, but locals told stories of strange lights, sounds, and shadowy figures. Jake swore it was just our imagination, or maybe someone playing a prank. Marcus said it was all nonsense, but Sarah, Lily, Ella, and I, we weren't so sure. Since then, I avoid that part of town, but sometimes when the wind howls just right, I swear I hear the scraping again, slow and deliberate, and the whispers calling me back to the warehouse on Miller's Road. The days after the trip felt strange, like the warehouse had somehow hooked into my mind and wasn't letting go. At school, everything seemed normal on the surface. Classes, homework, the usual noise and chaos. But for me, a quiet tension simmered beneath it all. I kept catching myself staring off into space, haunted by the darkness we'd stumbled into. Jake tried to act like nothing happened, cracking jokes and daring anyone to go back with him. It's probably just some homeless guy messing with us, he said, once in the cafeteria, slapping the table so hard it rattled the trays. But I caught the way he glanced around nervously when no one was looking. Sarah was the first to confide in me. We sat under the big oak tree after school, her notebook open but untouched. I keep saying these symbols in my dreams, she said softly, and that face, it won't leave me alone. I nodded, the memory of that twisty, hollow-eyed figure still vivid in my mind. Lily and Ella had stopped talking about the trip entirely, but I knew they felt it too, the same creeping dread. One afternoon, Tim showed me some photos he'd taken inside the warehouse. Most were just dark and blurry, but one chilled me to the bone. A faint, misty shape hovering near the back wall, almost like a face pressed against the air. When I zoomed in, the eyes seemed to follow me. Is this real? I whispered. Tim shrugged, but I could see he was shaken. The unease grew worse when strange things started happening around me. At night, my phone would ring with no one on the line. I'd hear footsteps outside my window when no one was there. Objects moved just slightly, A book fallen off the shelf, my backpack shifted on the floor, always just barely noticeable, as if something was testing boundaries. One night, unable to sleep, I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "What do you want?" The reply came in, a voice as cold and empty as the warehouse. "Leave." I wasn't sure if I was dreaming. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, Sarah and I decided we had to know more. We went back to the library, digging through old newspapers and archives. The fire had happened in 1978, a sudden blaze that trapped several workers. The official report said 5 people died, but locals swore there were more bodies never recovered. Rumors told of a foreman who'd pushed the workers to unsafe conditions, of arguments and fights that ended with someone disappearing inside the warehouse. Some whispered about curses and dark rituals performed in the dead of the night. The symbols on the walls matched a pattern we found in an obscure book about protective wards and warnings, but here they were twisted and corrupted. It felt like the warehouse itself was alive, holding on to something terrible. One weekend, against every instinct, Jake rallied us to return. "I'm not scared," he said, voice rough but determined. "We'll prove nothing's there." We agreed to go at dusk, when shadows stretched long and the air was cold. Inside, the warehouse felt different, quieter but heavier. Our footsteps sounded muted on the cracked concrete. The symbols seemed to glow faintly in the fading light, the scratchy marks fresh and deepened. Suddenly a cold wind whipped through, carrying voices, angry pleading and warning. "I warned you," the voice hissed. "You cannot escape." Panic erupted as the doors slammed shut again. Flashlights flickered wildly, and shadows moved faster than our eyes could follow. Sarah screamed when a shape lunged from the darkness, but it was just Tim, tripping over debris. We ran, hearts hammering, desperate for the exit. Outside, gasping, we swore never to return, but the warehouse had marked us. The whispers followed us home, dreams turned to nightmares, and slowly, one by one, we started noticing things we couldn't explain. Lily's sketches became darker, filled with twisted faces and words and strange symbols. Marcus stopped talking about the trip, his eyes hollow and distant. Ella became voidant of light, claiming shadows whispered her name. And me? I keep hearing the scraping, the whispering, always just beyond reach. I don't know if we'll ever be free, but I do know one thing. That warehouse on Miller's Road, it isn't quite done with us yet. I still remember the morning of the field trip like it was yesterday. A day that started off so normal, but ended up twisting into something I could never have imagined. Our class was going to Pine Ridge Nature Reserve, a sprawling patch of forest on the outskirts of town. A place full of towering pines, tangled underbrush, and miles of trails winding around a crystal clear lake. Miss Thompson had been planning the trip for weeks, promising us fresh air and a break from the stuffy classrooms. What made this trip extra special, at least for me, was that I was in charge of Nibbles, our class hamster. He wasn't the flashiest pet, but somehow he was the heart of the class. We took turns caring for him, and I was determined to keep him safe. I carried his travel cage carefully on my lap as we bounced along on the bus, talking softly to him. His tiny nose twitched every so often, and I felt a strange sense of peace just watching him. The bus ride was loud and chaotic. Kids shouted jokes, compared snacks, and stared out the windows at the changing scenery, from concrete streets to open fields, then dense woodlands. The sky was bright blue, scattered with fluffy clouds. When we finally arrived, the forest air hit me like a wave, crisp, cool, smelling of pine needles and wet earth. The reserve was beautiful, almost untouched, with massive trees towering overhead and ferns thick along the trail edges. It felt like stepping into another world. Our guide, Mr. Clark, was an older man with a rough beard and deep-set eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He gave us a quick rundown of the rules: stay on the paths, don't pick plants, no running, and then led us down the winding trail. At first, the group was buzzing with excitement. Jake kept teasing Lily about her constant note-taking. Marcus claimed he was bored already, while Sarah seemed lost in her own world, quietly observing everything. I walked near the back, focused on keeping Nibbles safe. The trail curved around a small hill, then dipped into a clearing by a pond that shimmered in the sunlight. Dragonflies danced above the water, and birds chirped from hidden branches. We stopped for a snack break, setting down backpacks and settling onto rocks and fallen logs. I gently placed Nibbles' cage on a sturdy log, careful not to jostle him. As I refilled his water bottle, I felt a strange chill run down my spine, like the forest was suddenly holding its breath. That's when I heard it, a soft click. The latch on Nibbles' cage door shifted. Before I could even blink, Nibbles bolted out, a tiny brown blur shooting into the thick underbrush. "No, Nibbles!" I screamed, crawling after him. Panic rippled through the group instantly. Miss Thompson's eyes went wide, and the kids froze in place, caught between shock and fear. "We need to find him," the guide said firmly, already scanning the bushes. We called his name, voices sharp and urgent, but the forest swallowed our words. Every shadow seemed to twitch with movement, branches scraping, leaving rusting, but nothing solid appeared. The trees grew closer, together as we pushed further in. The sunlight faded beneath the canopy. The ground was soft and damp, and my boots slipped over tangled roots. I caught sight of a flicker of brown near a mossy stump and darted forward, heart racing, but it was only a squirrel, chattering angrily before disappearing up a tree. The deeper we went, the heavier the air felt, almost like the forest was closing in. I thought I heard a faint squeak, "Nibbles?" But every time I moved toward the sound, it slipped away like a ghost. Suddenly, I tripped over something and landed hard on my hands. When I looked up, I saw tiny paw prints pressed into the mud. I held my breath. They were Nibbles' prints. "Here!" I called to the others, relief and hope flooding me. But then my eyes caught something else. Larger claw marks gouged deep into a fallen log. They looked fresh. The guide frowned and tightened his grip on his flashlight. "This forest isn't just home to small creatures," he said. Night was falling fast, and the temperature dropped. The forest transformed. The shadows stretched longer, and the sounds grew sharper. Somewhere far off, an animal howled, a mournful, lonely sound that sent chills through me. "Stay together," Miss Clark ordered, with her voice low. But the forest seemed to pull us apart. Twigs snapped, leaves rustled, and I swear, I saw shapes flitting just beyond the edge of my vision, glimpses of something watching us. At one point, I slipped and fell into a shallow ditch. When I looked up, glowing eyes stared back at me. A raccoon, but its gaze felt too intense, too knowing. I scrambled out and called to the others. We kept moving, but the unease was growing. The whispering started then, a soft, breathy sound like the wind weaving through the branches. It almost sounded like words or warnings, pleas, I couldn't tell. I tried to push the fear down, to focus on finding Nibbles. My hands were trembling as I called his name over and over. After what felt like hours, we finally made it back to the bus. The forest behind us was a wall of darkness and silence. Miss Thompson promised we'd come back first thing in the morning with more people and better equipment. That night, I barely slept. Outside my window, I thought I heard tiny scurrying noises. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a faint, high-pitched squeak that sounded so much like Nibbles. The next day, a search party gathered. People from the local community joined us, flashlights and dogs ready to comb the forest. We moved slowly and carefully, calling and listening. Time stretched unbearably. Every rustle set nerves on edge. The dogs would bark, then fall silent, their ears pricked towards sounds we couldn't hear. At one point, I found Nibbles' water bottle crushed near the base of an ancient oak. My heart pounded as I scanned the underbrush. Then I saw it, a small, shivering bundle of fur barely moving, tangled in some roots. "Nibbles!" I cried, scooping him up. He was dirty, his tiny body trembling with exhaustion, but alive. Relief flooded me, almost overwhelming. But even as I held him close, a shadow passed over us. The feeling that the forest was watching, waiting, and that we hadn't seen the last of what lurked there. I never thought a school field trip could scar me like this. The day started out normal enough. We were all buzzing with excitement, the kind only kids on a trip get, a break from classes, an adventure. I was sitting by the window on the yellow school bus, my backpack on my lap, watching the landscape shift as we left town behind. Our destination was Lakewood Historical Park, a place filled with old buildings, dusty trails, and the kind of silence that made you listen to your own breathing. Miss Lopez, our teacher, was cheerful and in charge, though you could tell she was hoping for a smooth day with no trouble. The bus was full, about 30 of us, all from the same grade. Friends were joking, some kids were throwing paper airplanes, others were just staring out the windows. I was halfway through an audiobook on my phone, but mostly I was just soaking in the freedom from my schoolwork. About an hour in, we hit the freeway that cut through the dense forest for miles. That's when I first noticed it, a monstrous rumble from behind us. I glanced back and my heart nearly stopped. A monster truck, no exaggeration, was tearing down the highway in our direction. Its massive wheels crushed the asphalt, leaving deep tire marks behind. It looked like something out of a demolition derby gone wild. The paint was chipped and scratched, rust streaking the sides like veins. The driver's window was down, and I could see a man behind the wheel. Wild eyes, tangled hair, a beard full of dirt. His mouth was twisted in a grin that was anything but friendly. "Look at that thing," I whispered to Emily, who was sitting next to me. Her face went pale as she turned to look. At first we thought it might just be a crazy driver or some sort of prank, but then the truck floored it, accelerating like it wanted to crush us. The bus driver stiffened, glancing in the rearview mirror, then said something to Miss Lopez. She stood up and told us, "Everyone stay calm, we're going to get through this." But the truck was relentless. It swerved wildly through traffic, honking and flashing. Cars around us were forced off the road or slammed on their brakes. We were caught in a nightmare of speed and noise. The first time the monster truck slammed into our rear bumper, the whole bus shook violently. Kids screamed. I grabbed Emily's arm, trying to keep us both steady. "Hold on," Mrs. Lopez yelled. The bus driver jerked the wheel, swerving to avoid the truck's next attack. We hit 70 miles per hour, the bus bouncing over small cracks in the highway. The monster truck followed, like a predator closing in. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would explode. I looked around at my classmates. Jake was white-faced, gripping his seat so hard his knuckles were pale. Lily was crying quietly, her head against the window. The noise and chaos was overwhelming. The bus driver radioed for help, but all we got was static. The highway stretched already, flanked by thick forest on both sides. We passed a sign. Next rest stop, 2 miles. Miss Lopez shouted, "We're pulling off up ahead." The bus made a sharp right onto the gravel entrance of the rest stop. The wheels kicked up dust and loose rocks. The monster truck wasn't done. It followed us onto the gravel, tires spinning and throwing debris. It slammed into the bus again and again. The metal groaned and I could feel the vibrations through the floor. Then the truck's driver climbed out, a hulking figure with wild eyes that seemed to glow in the fading light. He carried a heavy chain that clinked ominously as he approached. "Stay inside," Miss Lopez ordered, panic cracking in her voice. He pounded the side of the bus with the chain, shouting things we couldn't hear. I pressed my face to the window, trying to make out his lips. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he climbed back into his truck and tore off down a dirt road leading into the woods. We were left trembling, sitting on the edge of the dark forest. Help arrived after what felt like hours. Police and rescue teams combed the area in the woods, but they never found the truck or the man. Some said he was a local lunatic who vanished into the wilderness. Others whispered darker things, that the monster truck wasn't just a vehicle but a ghost haunting the roads, hunting anyone unlucky enough to cross its path. I don't know what it was, but sometimes when I drive at night, the rumble of an engine makes me freeze, and I swear those giant wheels are coming for me. Back at school, the news spread fast. Parents were frantic. The police opened an investigation, but there was no evidence. No license plate, no truck, no driver records. Our teacher, Miss Lopez, took days off. When she returned, she was quieter, her smile pretty forced. We all felt shaken, even the kids who tried to act tough. I started having nightmares. I'd wake up hearing engines roaring, giant wheels crushing gravel, the man's wild grin in the dark. At home, my parents tried to comfort me, but I could see the worry behind their eyes. I couldn't sleep. For weeks, I avoided looking in the rearview mirror while riding in cars. I even begged my parents not to drive past the rest stop where it happened. The police talked about a possible stolen vehicle or some crazy trucker gone rogue, but nothing came close to explaining what we faced. Months later, rumors spread around town. People said they saw a massive truck prowling the highways late at night. Some drivers reported being chased off the road by a monstrous vehicle that vanished when they tried to get a good look. One man told me he barely escaped being forced into the woods by a truck that seemed to appear out of nowhere. One evening, months after the trip, I was alone at home. I was finishing homework when I heard it. the deep rumble of an engine, distant but growing louder. I froze. Peering out the window, I saw headlights flickering on the empty street. A terrible dread filled me. I turned off all the lights and stayed still. The sound grew closer, louder and louder, and just outside my front door, I heard a heavy thud, like a massive tire crushing gravel. I didn't dare look. I held my breath until it faded. When I finally dared to glance out, nothing was there. But on the driveway, fresh tire tracks. The monster truck never came back to chase the bus again. But it never really left, and neither did the fear. I remember the day we left school like it was yesterday, though parts of it blur in my mind. The fear, confusion, exhaustion, all tangled together in a way that still clings to me. Our field trip was supposed to be one of those fun, memorable experiences. Pine Ridge Nature Reserve was famous for its sprawling trails, wildlife, and the quiet solitude that made it perfect for learning about the outdoors. The buzz was buzzing with excitement as we boarded. Kids talking non-stop about what we might see. I sat near the window, the warm morning sun pouring in, casting patterns on my notebook as I doodled. Miss Jenkins was her usual watchful self, reminding us to stay together and not stray from the group. Mr. Keller, the bus driver, looked calm and confident behind the wheel, though I later realized his face never really relaxed once we left the paved roads. The ride out was uneventful, the scenery shifting from familiar suburban neighborhoods to thick forests and rolling hills. Once we arrived, the morning went by quickly, guided by the park ranger's stories about local plants and animals. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. Birds sang above us, and the trail underfoot was soft with moss, scattered pine needles. Everything felt alive and peaceful. After lunch, when the group gathered near the main trailhead, Jake, Sarah, and I started whispering about a secret creek we'd heard about from older kids. It was supposed to be a hidden spot off any map, where the water was clear and cold, perfect for a quick swim. Miss Jenkins was hesitant at first, warning us not to wander too far. But after seeing how determined we were, she reluctantly agreed we could check it out as long as we didn't lose sight of the main trail. At first, the path seemed straightforward, but the forest quickly swallowed it whole. The trail narrowed, the trees grew thicker, their branches twisting overhead like giant hands. The ground became uneven, tangled with roots and slick patches of moss. We laughed nervously at first, daring each other to step over fallen logs or squeeze through tight spaces. The sun filtered through the canopy, casting flickering shadows that made the woods feel like they were moving. But then the path completely vanished. There was no way forward, no clear trail, only a sea of ferns and brambles blocking every direction. I looked at my phone, hoping for a signal. Nothing but that mocking spinning wheel. No messages, no calls, no maps. The weight of it hit me like a punch to the gut. I glanced at the others, Sarah's hands trembling as she held her backpack straps, and Jake's face tightened, his usual bravado slipping away. "We should turn back," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Jake didn't answer. Instead, he pushed forward, insisting he knew the way. We followed, unsure, but unwilling to argue. The deeper we went, the more the forest seemed to close in. The trees grew taller and closer together. The light dimmed as thick branches choked out the sun. Every direction looked the same, dark trunks, patches of moss, tangled roots. My breath came faster. The sound of leaves crunching beneath our feet was swallowed by an eerie silence that made every snap of a twig or rustle of a squirrel's tail feel like a warning. Then came the noises. At first faint, branches snapping in the distance, whispers of wind that sounded like voices, the low growl of an unseen animal. Sarah gasped, pointing to a shadow that darted between the trees. But when I looked again, nothing was there. We tried to retrace our steps, but the forest seemed to shift around us. Trails we thought we recognized disappeared, replaced by thick undergrowth or fallen logs. Panic blossomed inside me like a dark flower. Miss Jenkins tried to keep us calm. "We'll find the bus. We just need to stay together," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Her eyes darted nervously, scanning the shadows beyond the firelight. As the sun sank low, the cold crept in. We had no choice but to make camp in a small clearing. Miss Jenkins struggled to start a fire, striking a flint again and again. The wood was damp and stubborn, releasing only a faint smoke that barely warmed us. Some of the younger kids cried quietly, huddling together like frightened animals. I rubbed my hands desperately, trying to keep the chill at bay. Around us the forest whispered and shifted, every sound amplified in the darkness. I woke countless times that night, heart pounding at every crack and rustle. The shadows beyond the firelight seemed alive, with glowing eyes, fleeting shapes, whispers calling out my name. Sarah said she saw figures moving between the trees, watching us. I wanted to tell myself it was only my imagination, but the fear felt real and suffocating. By the second day, our food was almost gone. Granola bars and apples were rationed, so we barely ate. Water from the nearby stream was icy and tasted of earth and leaves, but we drank it anyway, desperate to stay alive. Miss Jenkins did her best to keep us organized, dividing what little we had and encouraging us to keep moving. The forest felt like a maze with no exit, each step heavier than the last. Tensions flared. Jake and Sarah argued fiercely over which way to go. The younger kids became withdrawn, some crying or refusing to walk. Jake, frustrated beyond reason, stormed off into the trees one afternoon. We called after him, but he didn't answer. Miss Jenkins ordered me and Sarah to stay put while she searched, but my heart pounded with dread the whole time. And every day felt the same, walking, hoping, fearing. We marked trees with strips of cloth, scratched tally marks into bark, desperate not to lose ourselves completely. But the forest seemed to shift, turning us around again and again. Sometimes I felt like the trees themselves were watching, closing behind us. At night, the sounds always grew worse. Low growls echoed just beyond the firelight. Branches snapped closer than before. I heard whispers, soft and urgent, as if the forest was trying to speak. Once, I thought I saw a pair of glowing eyes staring at me from the darkness. I blinked and it was gone. By the fourth day, our strength was nearly gone. We stumbled into a narrow dirt road buried beneath leaves and moss. It was a thread of hope, but it ended abruptly, blocked by a fallen trunk way too large to climb. We collapsed in exhaustion, the weight of despair pressing down. Miss Jenkins spoke quietly. Then, her voice cracked, but steady. She reminded us to stick together, conserve energy, and never give up hope. Her resolve kept us moving, though my legs trembled with each step. On the fifth day, after what felt like endless wandering, we heard voices, distant, faint, but real. Adrenaline surged through us as we called back, pushing toward the sound. When we finally emerged onto the main road, search teams surrounded us, faces full of disbelief and relief. The bus was parked right where we'd left it. Mr. Keller was standing nearby, shaking his head in silence. We were dirty, sunburned, scratched up, but alive. Even after we got home, the forest stayed with me. I'd lie awake at night, heart racing at every creak and whisper. Sometimes I swear I can still hear the trees breathing, waiting. I don't know what we got lost in that day, whether it was just a maze of wilderness or something darker, something alive and watchful. All I know is that part of me never left those woods, trapped somewhere between shadow and silence. The morning started like any other school day, but something about the air felt different, like a tension nobody could quite put their finger on. We piled onto the yellow school bus, backpacks loaded with snacks, notebooks, and excitement. Our destination was Cedar Valley Wildlife Preserve, a sprawling patch of wilderness filled with trails, creeks, and the promise of adventure. I sat next to my best friend Mia, who was nervously finding where the zipper could go on her bag. The sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, casting a soft glow on the sleepy faces of my classmates. Miss Harper, our homeroom teacher, did a final head count, her voice calm but a little tight. Mr. Benson, the bus driver, gave us a nod as he started the engine, and the bus rumbled forward, rolling onto the highway. For the first hour, everything was normal. The bus hummed steadily, windows fogged up from the cool morning air, mixed with the chatter and laughter inside. Some kids played cards or listened to music through earbuds. Others gazed out the window, watching trees and fields blur past. I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling twisting in my stomach, blaming it on nerves about the hike we'd be doing later. We stopped once for a bathroom break and to stretch at a small rest area nestled between towering pines. The air smelled of pine needles and damp earth. We laughed and ran around for a few minutes, chasing each other and making jokes. The teachers reminded us to stay close and not wander off. I remember looking up at the sky, clouds gathering, darker now, but no one seemed to worry. Storms in the afternoon were common this time of year. Back on the bus, the sky darkened fast. Thick gray clouds rolled in, swallowed the sunlight. The bus bounced along a narrow, winding country road, flanked by dense forest on both sides. The rain started as a sprinkle, and quickly became a downpour, hitting the windows with steady, urgent drumming. The windshield wipers thrashed furiously, but visibility was nearly zero. The headlights cast eerie beams into the sheets of rain. We rounded a sharp bend and everything changed. I saw the pickup truck first. It was hauling a large trailer loaded with equipment. The trailer swayed dangerously wide, jackknifing as the driver struggled to keep control on the slick road. Mr. Benson slammed on the brakes, the bus lurching forward, tires screeching on the wet pavement. Time seemed to stretch and warp. The world slowed down to the sound of metal grinding and glass shattering. The front of the bus slammed hard into the guardrail. The impact was bone-jarring, the sound deafening. The bus spun slightly, sliding sideways before coming to a sudden, violent stop. Inside, screams erupted. Kids cried out in shock and pain. I felt my head snap forward, then slam back against the seat. Sharp pain exploded across my forehead, warm blood trickling down my face. The bus tilted at an awkward angle, rain pounding the roof and windows. Smoke began to seep from the engine compartment, thick. The smell of gasoline filled the air. Panic set in like wildfire. I struggled to breathe through the chaos, heart hammering in my chest. "Everyone stay calm," Miss Harper shouted, her voice rising above the noise. But calm was impossible. The aisle was a wreck, bags tossed everywhere, broken glass glittering on the floor, overturned seats trapping some kids. I saw Lily, a younger student, frozen with tears, clutching her arm. I crawled over the debris to reach her, whispering that we get out together. She nodded, while trembling. We tried the emergency door in the back, but it was jammed. I heard someone screaming that the front door wouldn't open either. The bus was filling with smoke now, making it hard to see or breathe. The storm outside was relentless. Lightning flashing, thunder crashing, rain hammering down. Desperate, I grabbed a metal water bottle from the floor and smashed it against the nearest window. The glass resisted at first, then shattered in a spray of shards. Cold rain, wind hit my face to help Lily climb through. One by one we squeezed out into the storm. The ground was muddy and slippery beneath our feet. We stumbled down the embankment away from the burning bus, which now flickered with orange flames licking the air. The cries of injured classmates filled the darkness. We didn't stop to look back. We ran towards the woods, the wind whipping into our faces. Trees loomed overhead, the branches swaying and creaking ominously. The path was lost beneath. Leaves and debris, our group was scattered and panicked. Miss Harper called out for us to stay together, but the storm drowned her voice. I kept hold of Lily's hand, supporting her as she limped over roots and rocks. The cold seeped through my clothes, chilling me to the bone. Jake, who'd been sitting near the front, was bleeding heavily from a cut on his forehead. Sarah was coughing, probably from inhaling smoke, her eyes glassy. Hours passed in what felt like an endless nightmare. We wandered blindly, trying to find the road or any sign of help. Darkness pressed in, broken only by distant lighting. I could barely hear the sirens over the storm. Some kids sobbed quietly. Others tried to keep spirits up with shaky jokes. We finally found a small clearing, where the trees thinned just enough to see the gray sky. Huddled under pine branches, we shivered and shaked. What little water and food remained, Miss Harper did her best to comfort us, her voice steady but exhausted. I felt the weight of despair settle over us like a heavy blanket. When the rescue teams finally found us near dawn, relief and fear clashed in every face. Some of my classmates were taken away in ambulances. Mr. Benson was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. The truck driver was nowhere to be found. The memory of that terrifying night, screeching tires, twisting metal, screams in the storm, etched itself into my mind. Even now, 10 years later, when rain hits the window or thunder rumbles low, I feel that cold grip of fear all over again. The field trip that was supposed to be an adventure ended in disaster, and sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still see the flames flickering behind the trees and hear the desperate cries echoing through the storm. I still don't know if what we experienced was real or if our minds turned on us inside that place. But every time I close my eyes, I see that darkness again, deep, alive, and watching. It was supposed to be a simple geology field trip. We were a group of 11 high school seniors from Miss Sanderson's Earth Science class. She'd planned an overnight excursion to the Black Hollow Caverns, a supposedly dormant cave system nestled in the dense Appalachian foothills. I never even heard of the place until she handed us the permission slips. From the start, something felt off. Maybe it was the way the park ranger kept staring at the cave's mouth like it might move, or the fact that our GPS systems glitched out the moments we got within 2 miles of the site. But we were just teenagers. Weird tech and eerie grown-ups weren't enough to spook us. Not yet. The cave's entrance was a jagged slit in a hillside, surrounded by thick pines and the smell of damp earth. It yawned wide and low, like something had clawed it open. The air coming from inside was unnaturally cold, even for early October. We had headlamps, backup flashlights, and emergency radios. Miss Sanderson was no slouch. But once we crossed into the cave, it was like we'd entered another world. Our voices echoed in unnatural ways. Footsteps came back delayed. Sometimes we'd hear what sounded like our own laughter or whispering, even when we weren't talking. The path narrowed quickly, forcing us to move in a single file line. I was fourth from the front, behind Marcus, who kept joking about cave ghosts and trying to scare the girls behind us. But after about 30 minutes, even he went quiet. Some of the formations were beautiful, glittering with condensation, massive chambers lit by our beams like underground candles. But the deeper we went, the less organic it all felt. The rock shapes started to resemble things, bent limbs, gaping mouths, hollow eyes. I told myself I was imagining it. We stopped in a wide chamber to take notes. That's when we noticed Amy was gone. We'd just seen her a few minutes before, right behind Jason. She was quiet, sure, but not the type to wander. We all fanned out to search, some of us calling her name, others checking side tunnels with their flashlights. Miss Sanderson stayed calm at first, radioing for help. We were too far underground, and the signal just spat static. An hour passed, then 2. We found Amy's backpack in a small side tunnel. Nothing else. No footprints, no sound. We should have left. We should have gone back right then. But we didn't. We pressed. The deeper. Calling out. Checking every crevice. That's when we noticed the path behind us had changed. It wasn't just unfamiliar, it was all wrong. The tunnel we'd come through wasn't there anymore. It was in a tight place. An angular shaft that looked freshly dug. The walls were wet and smelled like rot. Miss Sanderson swore we hadn't come that way, and I believed her. From that point on, it felt like the cave was shifting. Some of the students said they heard whispering. I heard breathing, like something big far off was inhaling through miles of tunnels. Then Marcus screamed. He was at the back, and when we turned, he was gone. His flashlight lay on the ground, beam flickering against a wall that now looked melted. None of us said a word for a long time. Just that flickering light in our collective, thudding heartbeat. Miss Sanderson finally snapped out of it and ordered us to form a tight group. We obeyed, terrified and silent, trudging through new tunnels we didn't recognize. We marked our path with chalk, but when we turned corners, the chalk was gone, or moved. It scrambled. We were losing time, and we were losing people. Jason vanished when we all blinked during a water break. Literally turned around for a second and he was just not there. That night, or what we thought was night, since our watches had all stopped, we found a cavern filled with bones. Old bones, not just animal, some were human. Tiny skulls, broken femurs, and carved into the stone above the chamber were handprints, hundreds of them, some small, some impossibly large, like a bear's paw with fingers. We didn't sleep, we sat in a circle, headlamps dimming, listening to movement in the tunnels, wet dragging sounds, low growls. The smell of sulfur came and went like breath. Miss Sanderson was muttering to herself, praying maybe, or repeating names. The next morning it was morning, and she was gone. Her boots were still there, no sign of a struggle, just gone. And that left 5 of us, Mia, Anthony, Rachel, Kevin, and me. One by one, the others vanished. I don't even know how. I'd blink, turn my head, or just look at something, and someone would be missing. Mia went last. We were holding hands. I swear we were holding hands. And then I felt her grip slacken, and there was just empty air beside me. I ran. I didn't know how I found the exit. I don't even remember running. One second I was sobbing in a chamber of sick black stone, and the next I was on the forest floor. My flashlight was dead. My fingernails were torn and bleeding. My watch said 3 days had passed. The rescue team only found me. The others were never found. No trace, no clothing, no gear, no blood. Just a note left in one of the vans. You can't map what shifts. You can't wake what sleeps. I don't know what lives in those caves, but something does. And I also know it's still hungry.